That brings me to our next speaker, who again, and these are exciting people to talk to. Stephen Hodas has done an incredible range of things across both the private sector and the public sector. I earlier alluded to him having brought NASA online as the first federal agency online on the web, period, right? And so this great first step towards public engagement for an important civic institution. And today he's taking that same spirit of innovation to our schools right here in New York City, leading the effort to bring Innovation NYC to the way that we teach our kids. And so I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Stephen Hodas tonight. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to close this. Yeah? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Dana, for the chance to participate in this fantastic discussion. For the record, these observations are my own thoughts. They don't represent any statement of policy by the New York City Department of Ed. And I'm going to tell you a story, I think, which is sort of about the search for bad guys, because people like a good guy, bad guy story. In 2011, the Council of Chief State School Officers launched a project called the Shared Learning Collaborative, which was an effort to modernize the storage of student information to be less expensive, more secure, and have the potential to make teaching and learning more personalized. The data would be stored in a consistent and uniform format. It would link to Common Core instructional standards and resources, and be accessible via API to an ever-expanding array of dashboards that would be chosen independently by teachers, parents, and administrators for their own use. It would be compliant with all state and federal laws related to the privacy and security of student data, and provide local districts with full control over who has access to which fields and for what purpose, which is much more control than they have with most current information systems. The Carnegie and Gates Foundations contributed $100 million to fund the infrastructure in the organization, and in 2013, it launched in partnership with 9 states. You may not recognize the name Shared Learning Collaborative, but you've probably heard the name it launched under, In Bloom. If you know that name, you probably also know that since practically the day of its announcement, In Bloom has encountered so much opposition that every one of those 9 participating states has either backed out or has legislation pending that would bar its participation. What its designers had billed as student data backpacks, intended to make educators more effective, was branded by opponents as a national database of student psychometrics run by unaccountable for-profits. And parents and legislators quickly decided they wanted none of it. That something so potentially useful and so much an improvement in functionality and security could become so stigmatized so quickly, I think says a great deal about the unease we're experiencing more generally over the datafication of our everyday lives. For a number of reasons, this agita is playing out most overtly in the domain of education, even if, as I believe, it taps wells of frustration from many areas of our modern lives. Not coincidentally, student data combines aspects of both consumer and medical data. Like consumer data, it records your actions and choices. Which classes did you take? What grades and test scores did you get? How often are you late or absent or disciplined? But like medical data, it also records traits and conditions that you don't control. Who's raising you? Are you poor? Are you disabled? Are you medicated? So the concern and anxiety we have about the datafication of medical and consumer and all the rest of our behavior, whether that concern is rational or not, whether it's actionable or not, carries over into this realm. Increasingly, people feel that they, or in this case their kids, are being reduced through pervasive, relentless scrutiny and analysis to nothing more than the sum of their data, and that human knowledge and understanding are being replaced by algorithm. In a neat rhetorical shift that merits its own discussion, the term personalization has come to mean not more engagement with persons, but more automation and more mediation through abstraction. When personalization is no longer a close synonym for humanization, but instead its felt antithesis, you're headed for dissonance, with dissidents not far behind. And K-12 is a great site for dissidents. Parents in this country have always claimed the right to determine schools' practices to a degree that is inconceivable for any other government service. As a parent, you expect to be able to meet with your kids' teachers pretty much on demand. If you don't get satisfaction, whatever that may mean to you, you expect to be able to meet with the principal and the superintendent and the school board. Go try that at the police precinct, or the Department of Health, or the DMV. You can't tell Google to stop taking pictures of your house, or your pharmacy to stop selling your prescription data, or the NSA to stop logging your calls. But if you suddenly don't like the idea of schools contracting with corporations to maintain student records, which they've done for decades and without which they can't function, you can do something about it, and people are. They're forcing a fight which neither Gates nor Carnegie nor federal, state, or local departments of education were prepared. Had parents been sought out early on, a discussion could have been had on a shared set of facts with specific strengths and weaknesses enumerated, debated, and perhaps addressed. Instead, in Bloom, characterized as a fait accompli conspiracy of rapacious for-profits, unaccountable foundations, and an intrusive federal government, became a battleground between people for whom data is simply a raw material for the work that they do, and those from whom data is extracted under circumstances, terms, and conditions they don't control. In a recent interview about data policy, the Deputy U.S. Secretary of Education said that creating overly restrictive legislation based on vague concerns about security would be like not buying nice things because of a fear that a burglar might steal them. The problem is that parents don't feel that the benefits of these nice new things accrue to them, but that the risks do, even if they can't quite articulate what those risks are. They don't want yet another set of eyes casing them, sizing them up, reducing them to a potential asset class or target. To its advocates, In Bloom is a cross between clean, renewable energy and Santa Claus. To its opponents, In Bloom is a cross between Big Brother and Big Tobacco. What are the potential benefits of those nice new things? Those of us in this business think every day about the uses of data to transform schools. We take for granted that the accumulation of finer and finer data points linked to learning standards, instructional objects, and the whole universe of educational inputs and outputs will enable the refinement of instruction to a laser-like precision, the instructional equivalent of medical treatment uniquely targeted to each patient's genetic code. Deploying a different metaphor, Rick Hess and Bor Saxberg recently wrote that, quote, educators need to start approaching classroom challenges as learning engineers. But most parents would respond, no, they don't. Nor should they approach classroom challenges as psychometricians, physicians, or technologists. Parents and most teachers don't want to reimagine teaching as analyzing a cohort, curing a disease, or programming a robot. They don't want to think of kids as patients subject to continual diagnostic procedures or as knowledge repositories to be relentlessly queried for fidelity, any more than they themselves want to be reduced to the sum of their shopping patterns or healthcare consumption. Parents want schools to know their kids as people, not percentiles, through conversation and caretaking, not analysis. They want their teachers to be patient analog craftsmen, not makerbots instantiating instructional CAD. Fortunately, these fears don't mirror reality. We know that the tools that educators most embrace are the ones that lighten the burden of administrative and analytic tasks so that they can engage more effectively with their students' individuality, and those that help them to connect as professionals with their peers and as allies with students' families. There's a tremendous level of teacher enthusiasm for these supports, nearly all of which rely, like all modern software services, on ubiquitous access to current data, exactly the sort of thing that In Bloom was built to support. The crucial error of In Bloom's evangelists was not at the outset creating software for parents, designed from a parent's point of view, accessible, tangible experiences that would transmute abstract data into rich, relevant information for them. That mistake is unfortunately symptomatic of much government and foundation policy making, a simple failure of empathy and the basic principles of marketing that could have been avoided with a weekend seminar in user-centered design. This failure of policymakers to meet parents on equal terms with compelling services that clearly benefit their kids is particularly poignant because school governance is uniquely structured for accessibility and responsiveness to its constituents. But it also creates a powerful, if uncomfortable, opportunity for government and individuals to engage around the facts, rather than each reflexively trying to legislate away the monster under their particular bed. Education, particularly on the local level, is an ideal site to prototype the kinds of conversations about data that need to take place between citizens, government, and commercial institutions. The scale is right, the stakes are high enough to matter, and the outputs can serve as templates for others without requiring uniformity or imposition. The defining characteristic of robust innovation is learning from failure. The current regime of student data is seen as a failure by all of its stakeholders, though by each for very different reasons. The question now is, what will we learn? Thanks.